So this is a small announcement for the online folks, and also for the offline folks. We will be beginning the mains and prelims training session today itself. The first half, which is going online, um, is about the news analysis, just like every other day. But the second half is only for the offline folks here. We will be having the discussion on the skill of answer writing using the article that we'll be picking up today. Going forward, the second half of the session, which is about prelims and main skill building, will only be in the offline center, and the first half of news discussion will be online. Everybody on YouTube can also watch this, but if you are in and around Ashok Nagar in Hyderabad, we request you to come to the offline center for the second half of answer writing, because it is more practical to monitor your progress here at the offline center. With this context, we'll begin with the newspaper analysis for the day, and we will focus, just like every other day, on the important articles. Let's begin. Okay, we'll directly begin with the newspaper editorials. And the first article here is about the very style of negotiation of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and how it has an impact on economics, trade relations, geopolitics, and the whole gamut of issues that are surrounded on this topic. So let's focus on these issues now. Okay. The first one, if you take a look at the headline, this is in the end of the deal. Donald Trump's latest salvo is a negotiating strategy. The India-US trade talks will go on. What is the context? Now you have something called the World Trade Organization, which talks about creating a fair ground for all the trade talks, and there needs to be a rules-based world order, and as an extension to that philosophy, even World Trade Organization is supposed to be that platform which will create that rules-based world order and trade relations. But the problem is, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has virtually walked out of the World Trade Organization and the deals, and the route that he wants to take is bilateral relations, and using the hegemony of US as an important trading partner across the world, he wants to exert pressure and put pressure on tariffs, through tariffs. As a part of this strategy, 25% tariffs were imposed on India, and a lot of those are not in favor of India. The world did not react as badly as the US was hoping to. A testimony to this fact is, usually whenever there is a change in policies, the first place where you will see reaction is the financial markets. Take a look at any global market. It has not reacted to this threatening call because it's very impractical. Because virtually trade will break down. So this bullying tactics is just not working out for United States, is what this article tries to assert. The negotiation style of US is not going to help global trade or geopolitics or in any way. If you want to know the opinion of someone who is traditionally been a capitalist, let's say for example Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, these are people who are considered stalwarts in investing, and they definitely know a thing or two about economy. Back in 2011, when Donald Trump was initially making headway into um, politics and claiming that he is here to become a better candidate for presidential politics, they were of the opinion that personality cult cannot rule institutions. Today, whatever is happening is a testimony to that fact. So, here we are trying to say that whatever US is trying will not work in many sectors. For example, let's draw comparisons between what is happening in India and what is happening in the US. Sorry, China. China, how did China react? Because the kind of tariffs that were imposed on China is much higher. They did not react. They followed a strategy of de-dollarization. What do you mean by this? See, when will a currency like a dollar become valuable in global economy? When it is in demand. When, let's say for example, there are 200 odd countries in the world, and if every country thinks that dollar is important, having a possession of dollar is important, obviously the value will rise. What if people start dumping dollars where the value crashes? That is the de-dollarization strategy. To explain this de-dollarization strategy, let's take a step back and go to 2008 financial crisis. I will tell you the global financial crisis in brief. Those who are a part of the sessions previously know what I'm talking about, but let me explain once again. Back in 2008, a phenomenon called subprime lending was in news. What do you mean by subprime lending? Let's say, in simple words, if I have to talk in a very informal language, it is about your aukat. How much are you worth? Let's say, if these are instances where janitors were given house loans. Janitors means sweepers or who are from the housekeeping departments. There is a very famous anecdote that even janitors in 2006-2007 were given 2-3 home loans, where they normal situations they could not afford that kind of loans. The reason for that is because of the real estate boom that was happening in US markets, and because of the necessity to let go and clear this inventory, they were literally giving loans to anyone and everyone. And because of this, at one point of time, the house loans were not paid and people started giving up. They told the banks, you keep the house, we don't want to pay the loan. And as a result, what happened? We were sitting on inventory of huge real estate which is unoccupied. People were not able to pay the loans. The dollars were stuck. And it is during this phase, US started printing more money, and to revive the economy, it started pumping more money into the economy as a debt. It is during this time China was able to absorb a lot of dollars. And it devalued its currency so that even the exports at that time were favoring China. So they had control over dollars. The currency of China became cheaper in comparison to other countries. Let's say, for example, with $1, if they can get one commodity, when compared to the Chinese products, it would probably cost $1.50 if they are procuring from India. Obviously, Chinese folks would be more competitive. US will procure from China, and they did this throughout the last 2 decades, almost 2 decades. They were hoarding dollars so that dollar becomes valuable, and they were devaluing their currency so that it is cheap. And what is the formula for growth? They were focusing on this trade aspect. Okay, so trade. in this X minus M, it was always positive because China virtually became the factory of the world. And along with that, they were controlling the dollar supply largely. Now, with the kind of tariffs that were imposed, this took a hit. So, the weapon that US had was tariff. So, what is the weapon that China will have? Control over dollar. They started to dump dollars. And this is coming at a time where US debt is at an all-time high. One of the poll promise that Donald Trump had to come back to power is that they will reduce this. The reduction of the debt is one of the major poll promise. So on one hand, they are trying to, China is trying to dump dollars so that dollar value further crashes. And one more strategy it is following is they are, it's called the factory of the world. For example, you have, let's say any product like a leather bag. I don't know the names exactly. For example, Louis Vuitton. It's a very expensive bag. And if it's, for example, it's produced in China and it would cost you around $3,000 in US. The exact thing is produced not less than $100. It would not cost more than $100 to produce that, or even less. We don't know. What is China doing? Using its influencers and through a trend called live sales through social media platforms like TikTok, they are virtually shipping directly through third-party countries which have a trade agreement with US and producing goods which are extremely cheap and hurting the sales of these big brands. On one hand, they are finding a way to bypass this trade. On the other hand, they are trying to dump dollars and hurt US economy because of the bargaining tactics of US. And the entire economy there, the stakeholders in that economy are not exactly happy with Trump's way of dealing with things. Maybe the voters are happy, but the market cannot sustain for a long time. It has a spiraling effect. For example, it is not mentioned in this article, but I'm just giving as an example. Lot of these companies make profits. And as a part of that, a part of the profit through their equivalent of corporate social responsibility, philanthropic activities, they fund education through donations for universities. The so-called Ivy League universities are, running dry. They do not have funds from the capitalists. On the top of this, you also have the AI wave. China is also competing here for dominance in the so-called frontier technologies. When you have so many structural changes, do you really think tariffs will work? Because the very people that the country wants to benefit are getting hurt. So, the same line of thought you can deploy here even in Indian case. After the imposition of the 25% tariffs, there is absolutely no reaction from the market. Or whatever the reaction was there, it was bare minimum. So, it is clear that the market is convinced this is just bargaining tactics. He will anyway reduce the tariffs further. So, how should India react? What are the long-term shifts and the structural changes in our trade relations in order to avoid this kind of situations? Obviously, the answer is Atmanirbharta. Focus on indigenous capacities. Focus on R&D. Leverage technology and tech transfer. Okay? And at this point of time, it's like we are waiting who will blink first. Because trade negotiations are all about this tactics. And The provocative style of the President of United States is that he says Indian economy is dead. There is no possibility of growth there. We'll get back to that issue once again. It's in the explained page. But this is what he said. So, among the tariffs that were imposed, the sector that is most probably going to be hurt is agricultural sector and dairy sector. And it's because of this reason, US knows that India can't withstand a lot of pressure when it comes to these sectors. So they're waiting for us to blink and agree to the terms of the trade. So the article writer says that India is not interested this time to negotiate on such terms because it will hurt both long-term interest as well as our strategic interest. Even US knows this. India cannot be dealt only through economic lens. If things go sour, even the strategic advantage that US has with India will be lost. And they cannot afford this. The strategic interests include the geopolitics. To counter China, US needs India in our strategic backyard of Indo-Pacific. We need US needs Indian engineers. Even though there is a hardline policy that we will stop Indians from coming to the country, the very foundation of America is based on leveraging immigration and the talent pool from across the world. Okay, considering all these factors, you have to link it to India-US relations, economic relations, strategic relations, and learn a thing or two from China and figure out how to cushion the blow when things like this happen, at least for the near future. That is a takeaway from this article. And we need to focus on both the trade relations, that is economic relations, as well as the strategic relations. Okay, moving on. Now, Nisar. Nisar, synthetic aperture radar. This SAR is a special type of satellite which is jointly built by NASA and ISRO. It has been in news from many years. The speciality of this is, for the first time, it's the first remote sensing satellite. Once again, it is the first satellite which is launched through GSLV in sun synchronous orbit. Just check once again. Okay, GSLV. To understand the basics of what I'm talking about, you need to know about orbits. You need to know about GSLV and PSLV. Okay, I'll quickly explain that part also. GSLV, PSLV. So these are satellite launch vehicles. Okay. If you want to take heavier payloads means satellites, let's say some X kgs. Let's just use common sense and logic. Let's not overcomplicate things with science. Okay. Let's say you want to take X kgs to a very long distance, let's say 100 kgs. You would obviously need a sophisticated engine. But if you want to take the same X kgs to 1000 kgs, 1000 kilometers, not kgs, 1000 kilometers, you would need even further powerful engine, right? Either take a heavier payload to short distance or same weight to a longer distance. That will decide the choice of your launch vehicle. This GSLV is a launch vehicle that will take you to a very far distance. And this is for short distance. So heavier the payload, powerful the engine should be. This is what you need to know. So geosynchronous satellite or a geosynchronous orbit is nearly 36,000 kilometers from Earth. Anything less than that, you can use PSLV. That is good enough. But if the payload is heavier or the satellite is heavier, you will use GSLV only. So with that context, see what is Nisar using. Okay? And what is it meant for? To study climate change, to study land degradation, to study how forest cover is changing. All those will be through synthetic aperture radar. Okay? That is the importance here. You might get a prelims question mostly, but sometimes even UPSC will ask what are the latest developments and how the year has been. 2025 has been an year. 2025 has been a very eventful year for ISRO. There are a lot of launches. For example, there are technologies like SpaceX, Axiom 4 to learn from not just ISRO but space sector. Now you have Nisar, you have Gaganyaan, International Space Station, Gaganyaan. So you might get a question on any of this. You also have Chandrayaan. You might get a question on any of this, and you need to know for all those sectors the same kind of things. You need to know the satellite launch vehicle. You need to know the orbit. You need to know the purpose. You need to know the stakeholders. Essentially, you need to know the technology and the problem it is trying to solve. Clear? For all these technologies, you need to have this method. Whatever may be the science behind any space technology, always link it to the purpose. Rest of the things will be taken care. This is how I want you to prepare for any space related events. Okay, moving on. The crude fact. See, it's a very straightforward thing again. Let's link it back to the economic formula. When 85% of our crude oil is through imports, and when the import cost is linked to dollars, and if rupee is weakening, it essentially means we are moving towards trade deficit. Okay? To avoid that route, we are buying oil from Russia. Okay? US is reacting by imposing additional tariffs as penalty for buying oil from Russia. So, what we are trying to say is we have to respect our strategic autonomy. Just because US is a very significant power, economic power, we should not allow them to dictate terms. And we need to work on our energy transition for the long term. Always have this consistent thought process. Immediate reaction, short term, long term. Long term changes always require a structural shift in how we respond. Always have this in mind. Short term, medium term, long term. Short term, reduce the pain. Medium term, address the cause so that the pain is controlled. But in long term, completely detach from the process so that root cause is eliminated. In approaching any issue in governance, this should be your thought process. always look at international relations, economy, science and technology, governance. No matter what topic we are talking about, always look at long-term solutions, which is the ideal state. These are the jugaad fixes. Okay. So jugaad fixes means something temporary to alleviate the pain. These are never long-term solutions. This is like a band-aid. This is like a surgery. Which is meant for permanent fix. Clear? Democracy grown at home. This is about Cholas. The other day we were talking about Chola administration. There is an ancient temple in Tamil Nadu. Recently our Prime Minister visited that place and spoke about the roots of democracy. Okay. I will briefly explain the context, and after this we will see some other articles, but today's mains answer writing will be about this. We will be mixing both history as well as contemporary touch, and we will see how to go about it. And this will be only for the offline folks after the class is over. Now, what is this article about? The fundamental question here is, if we are looking at the word democracy, is it always a part of Indian ethos? Do we know this from ancient times, or it's a gift from Western world? This is the question. Anything that you say should be substantiated with proof, right? The Uttar Merur inscription, which talks about Chola administration, you will see this in your basic textbooks. So this is an opportunity for you to go back to Chola administration, Chola history basically, and look at the administrative aspects of it, because I am probably expecting some sort of an administration based question from Chola's standpoint. Okay, either in prelims or in mains, next year or this year, we don't know. When you're talking about election, the social contract theory is again back in the picture. Between an individual and a state, why do we need a state? To protect us, to reduce that friction among individuals, for regulation and smooth functioning. Social contract means individuals surrender a part of their power to the state in the expectation that they will be protected and governed well. Democracy is that idea where all people are given equal opportunity. The question here is, does democracy exist in ancient India? The answer is yes. Uttar Merur inscription says so. At local level, yes, it is highly localized, but the initial, the seeds of the idea of democracy were laid in the Chola period itself. If you take a look at the three-tier governance that we have today, MPs, MLAs, and all the Gram Sabhas and Gram Panchayats, all at the third tier, Panchayat system. This came after the 73rd and 74th Amendment Act, primarily because we wanted to take democracy to the grassroots level. Now, when you are looking at articles like this, what should you focus on? UPSC has a tendency to pick up questions from history through current affairs as an inspiration. Now, if I ask you, what is it that you can learn? What will you learn from Chola history for modern day times? This is the question that we will address today. How to build an answer for this? What are the practical difficulties? We will see. Okay. But to be able to answer that, you will need some information, right? I am giving you that information. So there is an inscription in Uttar Merur in 1920 AD. Please note down these facts so that it is useful for your answer writing. Okay. In 920, not 1920, 920 AD, during Parantaka Chola, you have something called Uttar Merur inscription, which talks about the administration of Cholas. Fact number 1. Okay, before this, I will tell you why we are doing this. See, when you want to write an answer for a question, what is the usual assumption? Since we don't have facts, we won't be able to write. But are facts enough? What does it take to write an answer? If you want to write a 150-word answer, is information alone enough? I will list down a series of facts. Using the same facts, now let us answer a question. Okay? Okay. Write down this first fact of Uttar Merur inscription. After that, talk about the Kudavolai system. Note this down. Kudavolai system. This is a system where villages, select people, not everyone, a few set of people came and wrote down their, whoever they wanted to elect on a palm leaf, folded it and posted in a pot, which is like a ballot box. This system is called Kudavolai system. Fact number 2. Now, there were something called feudal councils. Yes. The Tamil names need not be important, but just understand that there are feudal councils. What do you mean by feudal council? The system of economy back then is called feudalism. What is feudalism? It is based on land, where landowners were the feudal lords and they were governing that piece of land. This is the third thing you need to know. Fourth thing, model of conduct. There is a list. Please note down these facts so that you don't complain that I don't have facts to write an answer. Even after knowing facts, you will understand what is the problem of answer writing. I will tell you. In this model code of conduct, there are some disqualification norms. If you are not paying your taxes promptly, that is one method of disqualification. There are a list of other such kind of things, but no need to go into that depth. This is the fourth fact. Now, ancient village republics represent advanced model of participatory democracy. The elections were not just rituals, they were mechanisms of civic accountability. Elections as mechanisms of civic accountability. Okay? These are the facts that you need to know. We will stop this article here and carry forward the rest of the discussion after the session is over. I hope you noted down these facts. You will have to write an answer and you need to know certain facts, right? You have 5 or 6 facts. Let's see. Moving on. Now, why Arya Samaj marriages are under the scanner of courts? See, there is a law which regulates and registers marriages, Hindu Marriage Act. Okay? and there is another act called the Special Marriage Act. These acts will help you register as couples. Okay. So, Arya Samaj marriages. Arya Samaj is a socio-religious reformist group, the genesis of which you will see in 1800s and 1900s. Dayanand Saraswati started this Arya Samaj, and the rituals they follow is, primarily based on the philosophy of Upanishads, but it discards the negative aspects of Hinduism, and therefore Arya Samaj marriages are considered to be the go-to option for a lot of couples. But the problem is, Hindu Marriage Act and the Special Marriage Act, those are not, addressing the legal complications involved in this case. If there are allegations of forced conversions, if there are allegations of elopement, how will the law address that issue? Should an Arya Samaj marriage be registered, or should we first go back and interrogate if there is indeed a forced conversion or not? These kind of issues are popping up and the issue is still developing. Therefore, we will see and wait for the court judgment. Okay. Health of Indian economy. See, we have been discussing this quite a few times. India is one of the top 5 countries in size of economy. We have our strengths. The context of this is, I told you, right? Trump called Indian economy as a dead economy. Is it true? Is it false? How do you decide? Based on macroeconomic variables. What are those macroeconomic variables? GDP. Okay. Comparison of GDP, decadal comparison. And other metrics like unemployment, inflation, current account deficit, trade deficit, debt to GDP ratio. In all this, India is doing fairly well except in 2 things. One is inequality, and the other one is, any guess? Employment, exactly. Gainful employment, to be very precise. Quality employment. So, looking at Donald Trump statement, we need not dismiss Indian economy per se, but let us use this opportunity to see where we can fix our issues. Just like the world is undergoing a fundamental shift in the structure of economy, thanks to this AI revolution, just like how we discussed yesterday, India is also undergoing that. We need to invest our time, energy and skills in adapting to that change. That is the only takeaway from this article. I am not going to explain in detail. Okay? Now, the last 2 articles. One is China announced a subsidy because their population growth rate has almost stagnated. In fact, the younger population are not producing enough kids to replace the existing ones. So their workforce is coming down. Same is the case in Japan, South Korea and other economies. So the government decided that we will give subsidy. China is historically known for its population. It imposed a one-child policy. You are not allowed to have more than 1 kid. But the problem is, after that generation, women participating in economy are not given equal opportunities, and the very sociological shift that happened, now the world is witnessing where even 2 incomes are just not enough to sustain a family. So even the married couples are not really looking forward to have kids because it's so expensive. Consider the case of India. Inflation in economy is somewhere around at max 5 to 6%, let's say. It is still within the range. But you know the inflation of education sector? 14 to 17%. If your wages are not growing enough, how will you fund your kids? And these are the kind of questions that are stopping couples. So the subsidy given by China, is it going to be good enough? The answer is unlikely, because it doesn't address the root causes, sociological causes. It is a mix of both culture as well as economy. Okay, this is the article. So that brings us to the end of the newspaper discussion. This is it for the online folks. Offline folks, now we will, after a brief pause, begin the answer writing class.